Hey everyone, this is Chris Murdock. Welcome to Recruiting Connections with me. We're just going to jump right into it, but I'm going to let Kay Kelison introduce herself, and then we're going to jump into why we connected.
Hi, thanks, Chris, for having me. My name is Kay Kelison, as Chris generously said. I am a sourcing manager at Zillow. I've been in recruiting for going on 27 years. And I'm really excited for this opportunity to discuss with Chris all different things about recruiting. But I'm here to participate and really enjoy our conversation.
Well, and I appreciate you coming in. We're going to talk about one aspect of recruiting that I don't think gets as much coverage. And it's the reason why I reached out to connect. You had written an article called Empathetic Leadership is Key in Recruiting. And I read through this and I saw myself throughout this for a reason. But I just want to get your overall take on why empathy is so important in this chosen industry of ours.
Oh, that's such a big loaded question.
I know this is why we don't prep ahead of time.
I really think that with today and everything, whether it's the politics, whether it's our environment, whether different industry, we need to have more empathy. There's a difference between empathy and sympathy. So let's just make sure that's very clear. We need to connect more as humans, and we need to understand and meet people where they're at emotionally in the workspace and in the personal space. Now that we're in a distributed workforce environment and we're working from home, there's just so many different factors that play in our daily life that sometimes we need to pause and we need to show more empathy on, like, if a mother's having a sick child or a grandparents are in need, or we're struggling at work because we're afraid to even admit that we're having some challenges. We focus on, like, oh, there's a problem. What is that problem? How do we fix that problem? But we're not stepping back and looking about the whole problem. You know what I mean?
Yeah, a lot of people in recruiting, we get into this business because we want to make people happy. We want the hiring managers to hire the best talent. We want the candidates to find the best job for themselves. And oftentimes, we do that to the detriment of our mental health, our sometimes physical health. Especially now when you are working from home, it's hard to separate what is work time, what is personal time. Understanding there are people that are not going to take care of themselves.
Oh, yeah.
And then reaching out to them, my job is to make sure people don't get burnt out.
Right. I also think that as leaders, we have to be a little bit more in tune with those that we are managing.
Mhm.
And sometimes we get busy ourselves. And sometimes we just want a quick update or something, and we don't actually allow ourselves to take the time or invest the time in the individual because, like sources of recruiter, almost like we're seeking for approval or seeking for it's okay to feel this way. And when the leader doesn't show up 100%, I mean, we're humans too.
Mhm.
We make mistakes. And I think sometimes we're afraid to even admit that we're making mistake and whatnot. And so what we're trying to change the language around it is more like, let's get curious. Let's get curious about why this didn't work. Not that you're doing a bad job, but taking a step back and really embracing the whole entire process and see if something happened and how we can course correct, how we can get together. I mean, that's why we have teams, right? I mean, we have teams to solve the problem or get curious about, like, how can we change it up to get better results? How do we invite because we're all accountable, we're all stakeholders in our company.
And you just hit the nail on the head there, accountability. And from the day that our new hires start, I'm telling them it's okay to hold me accountable.
Yep.
I'm telling them I'm going to make mistakes, and I want them to know who I am. I walk them through the orientation session that I do, but at the end, I take the time to tell them my story, who I am, where I grew up, how I got into recruiting, how my career progressed, talk about my daughter, talk about my wife, because I want them to know who I am. And there's this term, the norm of reciprocity, is the hope that if I am transparent with who I am, that they'll feel more comfortable reciprocating with a similar mindset. They don't have to, I don't require it, but I essentially open myself up so that they can be comfortable opening themselves up. And then also over time, they become more and more comfortable holding me accountable, pointing out when I've made a mistake,
Yep.
because I'm enabling it. I want them to come to me if I make a mistake. And I've got a good example. And I'd love to get your thoughts on how I handled it. So we had a member of the team, and they wanted to implement kind of a session on what is implicit bias.
Mm.
And we were going through a growth spurt. And at the time, we were just barely able to keep our heads above water, and to create something that would have added time to their workload or to mine. I asked, can we wait a month or two until things kind of slow down? Things didn't slow down, but they made a case. And that said, we need to do this. Ultimately, my biggest regret was waiting. It had one of the biggest impacts on this company. It's grown. It's become part of our orientation. It's become part of our training program. The understanding and helping people understand how to identify bias, how to leverage and identify your own, the bias of the client and all that. It was probably one of the most impactful things. And I sat down with them and I said, thank you so much for following up, making me accountable for making this happen. And I acknowledged I should never have waited. This was so impactful. And I acknowledge my mistake. And I have told this story to anyone that will listen, because it is important to listen and understand that when you ask somebody that is very passionate about a certain something and you ask them to wait, understand what that impact is. But then at the same time, I said, well, let's talk about it in 2 months. They didn't wait 2 months. Every 2 weeks. Can we do it now? Through polite persistence, they got it done.
Well, first of all, I commend you, because I think it takes a lot for a leader. And I've always struggled with this. I don't understand why as leaders, we have a hard time saying, my bad, I messed up. I should have even took more time to really understand this impact that you obviously had. The fact that you actually come to full on human connection, like the full human part. When you say I made a mistake, people really relate to that. Mm-hmm. And you're setting the example of how you want to show up. And by setting the example, showing up that way, they're going to reflect that same behavior. But I think sometimes leadership has a sense of, I don't want to show the human part of me because I'm just all business, or I just need to look like I'm leading. And they're not really leading. They're sort of like having this persona of like what leadership is, and instead just being human. You use certain languages that sometimes prohibit us to relate. When I am trying to share something, I first want to compliment them and really relate to, like, they're coming to the table and they're really showing up, and then I want to be there to support them. And when we have projects too, and we're like, well, how do you own it? How do you think fast, move fast? And how do you implement it? And sometimes it doesn't make sense. And sometimes when we're investing the time, we need all the details. And I have to trust my team. They're going to follow through and get out of the way, because sometimes we could be the bottleneck. Sometimes we're holding it up. And that's amazing that you acknowledge their work.
And also at the same time, though, we're also making sure that, if mistakes are made, that we don't yell. We don't get mad. We want to make sure that we're understanding the why something didn't work out, or why somebody wasn't able to meet goals that were set. I'm not a boss. It's funny. Just as a quick aside, when I go out with the members of the team, they'll ask me to go out, and they'll run into some friends or something, and I'll stop them now, because they used to introduce me. This is my boss. Their friends would immediately bristle and be on their, quote unquote, best behavior. And so I've gotten to the point now, because I recognize people were becoming a little uncomfortable having drinks with their friend, their friend's boss, I put that in air quotes because I'm really not. Right. I'll interject and introduce myself as a coworker. I understand how that word boss makes them feel. Yeah. And we went to one of the members of the team, Zach. He's a comedian, and he organizes a comedy show. And, he had told me about it. I missed the first one. I was not about to miss the second. Right. Because he told me about it, put it on my calendar. I bought tickets. I went, and I got roasted. It was so great. For those of you listening that know me well, for those that don't, I have a good sense of humor. I'll make a bunch of dad jokes, but you can make fun of me too. And so we're sitting there, half the room is IQ talent partners, like half the room are his coworkers. And Zach gets up to start the show and he says, "Hey, everyone, I'm a little nervous today. People from my job are here, IQ talent partners," and everybody cheers. And he's like, "Yeah, I'm a little nervous." And even one of the founders is here. And I'm glad he didn't introduce me as the boss. He did say, one of the founders is here. If you don't know who he is, he's the guy that looks like Jason Statham if he drove for Uber. And there was one person that was like, "Oh no." And then Zach made a joke that said, "Hey, I might be looking for a job on Monday." and I was laughing so hard I was crying. Thing is, I told him beforehand, I said, "Hey, I had a dream that you roasted me and it was phenomenal. I want you to know that don't hold back. Be true to yourself. And that's actually part of our motto here is, be authentic, be yourself, bring yourself to the job that you're doing and the job at hand." And when he did it, I gave him a hug afterwards and said, "That was awesome." And I have told everyone that joke.
I wish there was more people like you. I'm noticing that we use a lot of cliche languages in our industry, like transparency, authentically and stuff, but I'm not sure we truly live it,
More so now. If I'm going to have all these remote employees and members of my team that I'm going to have to interact with, how do I do that remotely? And so people took a lot of inward looking glances at themselves. How can I project who I am and who I need to be for my team over a Zoom call?
Yeah. And I remember being the first remote full-time employee at Zillow 7 years ago. My VP is like, "Hey, it's amazing how connected you are." And I've been a remote employee for 15 years or so. And it does take a lot of work to be connected, make sure you're present and stuff. And then the pandemic happened. And then it's like, see, I told you, you can connect. You have to embrace technology, obviously, you have to be present. You have to use tools, but it's also manageable if you use them right, if you set up the cadence right and whatnot. And I remember in the beginning, I did a lot of coaching. I did a lot of training on best practices and stuff like that, because, us recruiters and sourcers are natural connectors. Like we need that. We need to sit next to a colleague. And we're so used to that it puts a panic in people on like, am I going to have a job next week? Because my manager wants to know where I'm at, what time I'm at, checking the Slack channel, see if I'm online and stuff. And that's a behavior we need to still remove, but I think it's gotten a lot better for sure.
So for you, having been remote for so long, I mean, you had the muscle memory. Yeah. Then there's the rest of us that I had members that were remote, but it wasn't at the volume it became. Right. We have people back in the office now, but we still have a vast majority of our team remote. And I remember just being physically exhausted and mentally exhausted because as an empathetic person, I'm looking extra hard at the screen to see how are you reacting? How are you responding to what I'm saying? And I am so hyper-focused to watch your body language, to see how you react and how you respond. And I've gotten used to it. You develop, the calluses, but man, it was exhausting.
I have to still sometimes, like, I'll tell my team, it's like, your mental health is the number one concern for me. Making sure you feel connected, making sure you feel valued, making sure you're set up for success, and it's okay to fail. Fail is what I'm grateful for, because we learn from failure. We talk about it on a regular basis on our team, that it's okay to fail. It's what we do with that failure and how we learn from that failure to grow. So therefore, setting a cadence of being grateful, not just for everyday positivity and stuff, but also an opportunity to learn. Habit that we need to change a little bit, because failure in recruiting means you're not doing your job right. Failure in recruiting means that you can't handle the job. You're not capable of doing it. And I think we need to kind of reverse engineer that in a sense to where we are going to fail. We're not going to always land that candidate. We're not always going to follow the process, or, did we ask the right questions and whatnot. Mm-hmm. It's really about showing up for one another. And if someone is having a struggling time, my team gets behind that individual, whether it's a recruiter or a sourcer, and we build them up. And it's taken some time to change that behavior or that habit. from behavior to habit. I really think that we have habits that we can break, but then we can replace them on really healthy habits.
Yeah, and I think also, there are people that use, and you use the term in your piece on everyone, servant leader, and I agree with the sentiment, but to me, the term servant leader means I don't matter, and that's just a semantic thing. But ultimately, I'm a supportive leader. I'm an
Yeah,
empathetic leader
yeah,
by putting in that support infrastructure
yeah.
versus the word servant.
Well, to me that I think of servant because leaders are made based on how people show up, right?
Mhm.
Like
Yeah.
it's more of that meme that there's a leader that's leading forward in the front and then there's leader in the back. I'm the leader in the back. If my team is showing up and they're performing, I'm proud of that because that's my leadership guidance. That's
Mhm.
them showing up with the confidence that they know I have their back. And so for me, a servant is more like I'm serving you to be the best because then it makes me be the best.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's more of the content, but I understand what you're saying.
Yeah,
Um,
and I've had this debate, before, and the thing is, it all means the same. That's the thing.
yeah,
The
it
motivation is the
really
same, but I want to flip it. The reason I
is.
flip it is because my team looks out for me.
Yep.
If they notice I'm stressed out or I'm taking too much on, and they notice a change in me, they come to me and
Mhm.
they say something to me, and they've done this repeatedly from the moment we hired our first employee here in Nashville 10 years ago. He's still here. And so I told him, I said, there are going to be times when you're going to have to tell me no. You're going to see me getting stressed out because I'm going to keep saying yes.
Yep.
So you're going to have to tell me no. And so from the very beginning, the accountability was bi-directional.
Yep.
The If he got stressed, and then since everybody else has been here too, if I see people getting stressed, I'm going to say something. I'll pull them aside. We'll go in a room that doesn't have a door, or I'll put them in a position where their back is to the glass so they can be honest and open if there's something going on. So we're always looking out for each other, but the team looks out for me as well, which is why the term servant leader makes it seem like it's just one direction.
Yep.
Whereas that's why I like the whole idea of supportive, nurturing, those types of things.
Yep.
But I understand the
Well,
motivation.
and it's so refreshing to hear your point of view as a leader because I really strive to be a leader that is inclusive enough to where I don't like the title like, oh, you're my boss as well.
Mhm.
I keep on reminding people we are a team. Even though I'm in a leadership role doesn't mean I'm different from you. I'm here to help you solve the problem. We're here together
Mhm.
to make things work. We're here to challenge each other. I want them to give me feedback. It's like, how am I doing as a leader? I want them to come and provide feedback because we need to hear that.
Yeah.
We need to be in touch with each other because I've dealt with some leaders that just manage up, but they totally forget the people on the bottom, and they think everything's going to be taken care of. And then when stuff rolls downhill, it's on us.
No, that doesn't happen ever.
Never. Never.
It never happens. We got a training class today, and I tell them, if anything goes wrong, if you feel like something isn't right, whether you can articulate why or not, raise your hand.
Yep.
I said, recruiters typically have opinions, and you've got 450, coworkers that are ready to provide them if
Yep.
you need help, whether you go to your practice leader, which is your supervisor, your
Yep.
account manager, the engagement leaders, or just somebody sitting next to you. If something's not right, say something,
Right.
raise your hand, and they'll help you understand who to go to. And we don't micromanage our team. We try to make sure we give everyone the tools, the philosophies, and also, but the access is just as important as
Yep.
all the other, I think access to assistance is more important than LinkedIn, Seek Out, Hire Easy.
100%. Yep.
Yeah. If you don't have access to leadership, if you don't have access to your coworkers, if you don't have that collegial access and relationship with your hiring managers and the interviewers, your job's going to suck.
Well, and like I tell my team is that you don't need permission to grab coffee for a hiring manager. We're all part of the company. We're all
Mhm.
stakeholders. We all have a piece of the pie for the success. And so, we have to have all the ingredients, and having the all ingredients got to mix well together. And
Yeah.
to me, the sources are like sometimes surprised when I say, grab coffee with a hiring manager, get to know the hiring manager, build that trust. You show up better when you show interest in that person as a person. And the way people open up when you have that connection, that comfortableness,
Mhm.
instead of like, hiring managers aren't perfect. They need guidance. They need to be coached on the best practices of interviewing. And that gives us opportunity to really help them out. And when they're helped, it comes back in twice as much. And it's kind of shocks the sources when I say go out and get a coffee. You don't even have to talk about sourcing, but it warms that person up to where they're going to open up. They're going to be more truthful with you.
Yeah, well, and also you realize that they're not superhuman.
Right.
They're not on a pedestal. They're not,
And they're a
like,
lot more fun than we think they are.
yeah, my first week in recruiting in October of 1999. I go back that long
Me
to
too. Me too.
rulers and 3x5
98,
card catalogs.
98 for me.
Yeah. So it was funny as the staff needed me to cover the phones, but they didn't teach me how to forward. And so I ended up hanging up on the president and CEO of like
No.
Hard Rock
Oh no.
3 times. And so finally, when he called back the fourth time, he was laughing so hard, and I apologized, and I said, I'm gonna put you on hold. I'm gonna walk down. I said this is my first week. They didn't train me on how to forward a call, so I walked down the hall. Jeff showed me how to do it, Jeff Lemming, and then I turned around, went back out, forwarded the call. Jeff came back out and said, "You're not fired. So and so said, to tell you you're not going to get fired." And he said he said he could hear the terror in your voice. Can you please tell him he's not going to get fired? But to me, that meant he was empathetic. He had that empathetic quotient. He's human. He understood I was human, that I didn't do it on purpose. And so from that point on, I kind of recognized that, I can call CEOs, I can call board members, I can interact with all these people. And because I can, if I can find a way to connect, find a way to find that affinity, that common ground, we're going to be successful. We're going to be, partners in this process, whether I'm an in-house recruiter or a third party.
Yep.
We're going to have a good time. We're going to get this done. Yeah.
Well, I got a question for you. Why do you think it's taken this long for us to start talking about human connection when our job is about human connection? When we're constantly talking about treating people like humans, putting their emotions first, their situation first. Why do you think sometimes leaders have a hard time making that connection?
We've relied too much on technology, and I think people are finally taking notice. We're not just a bunch of numbers on Monster,
Right.
on a Monster URL. We're not just an applicant in the database. We're not just a profile on LinkedIn, because we've received so much spam on LinkedIn and so much spam email. I think we're starting to there's that fatigue. And I
Yep.
think there's a desire to be a human and be treated like a human, just in general, just in life in general. And now I think it's really trickling in, because engagement, it's easy enough to identify potential candidates.
Yep.
It's hard to engage. And when you have to focus on that engagement, and we have had to do that probably for the last 3 or 4 years, you got to
Mhm.
understand, how am I going to connect with
Yeah.
this person? How am I going to get this person to respond to me and not the thousands of other people that are spamming them? And I have a good example. Somebody on my team, Lauren, took the time to read a person's profile and referenced it. The person was a Spice Girls expert. Was actually on the LinkedIn profile, or some social media site. So
That's my
she
favorite style.
her subject line said, "Tell me what you want, what you really, really want." And then in the body, you wanna talk about this other, the job.
I love
The
it.
candidate wasn't interested in the company, but he was interested in building a relationship with Lauren,
Yep.
because she took the time to call something out that was obviously important, and took the time to engage. And this is a candidate that she had messaged a couple times, but then found this thing about the Spice Girls.
Yeah.
And that differentiated her from the hundreds of other recruiters because she wanted to meet him where he was.
And I think we emphasize so much on the metrics that a lot of times people hear this story is like, well, I wish I had that time to do that. And the funny thing is they do. I think one of the things, like I mentioned earlier about the book Atomic Habits, one thing that really resonated with me is where we need to spend less time on goals and more time on the system. Because if we focus on the system, whatever the system we're working on, the goals will happen. And I think sometimes recruiter is the opposite. We think about the goals and then we work backwards and we don't look at all the key factors that make that goal success. So that just really resonated with me.
And actually, it's so funny that you bring that up because somebody in the new training class today asked about books, and I talked about some of the standard books in recruitment. But then our lead trainer talked about Atomic Habits, and I think we'll definitely this is serendipitous that you bring it up. So I'll make sure to get some copies in the office ASAP. People say, "Oh, I don't have time." One of my favorite quotes, and I think we'll use this to bring this home.
Okay.
You can't manufacture time, but you can affect your energy and where you put your energy. I think now we are at a point where we understand we're never going to be able to make up the time. We're focused on making sure we have work-life balance.
Yep.
And so now we're all focused on putting our energy where it matters most. And I think we're starting to finally come around to our energy belongs with the people that we work with. Either, it's the energy that we focus on our family, and so being present. And I think that's where all of this is coming from, because
we also have to meet people where they're at and not have the same expectations all the time, because everybody, like you said, everybody's in a different situation. And I really truly believe that we have to invest the time to make that human connection and really allow people to be where they're at and comfortable and knowing that we have their backs and that they will be set up for success with that human part.
Agreed. I think there's a mic drop there. I'm not going to drop it. This mic's expensive. So I want to thank you, Kay, for reaching out. I mean, after I read your note, I sent you a message immediately upon finishing the article, and I think you responded within 5 minutes.
I was so touched and so honored because, when you write something that you're passionate about and you relate to, you don't know who's going to be reading it. I just want to start talking about it. I mean, we talk about it in conferences, we talk it amongst ourselves, but I'd really like to start seeing us changing towards that.
I think we are, and I think we'll get there. It's going to take time. It's going to take effort. Was it George Harrison's song? It's going to take patience and time to do it right.
Hey, thanks for that. I'll now have that song in my head. Luckily for me, my son plays electric and loves the Beatles, and loves George Harrison. So.
Yeah. Well, Kay, I'm going to have, we'll have a link to your LinkedIn. I'm going to actually even link out to the article you wrote so people can read it afterwards and then I'll also make sure to have a link to the Atomic Habits on Amazon so that people can take a look at that. Thank you so much for taking the time to connect.
Can I just do a plug?
Sure.
On our community, Everyone Facebook page, Everyone community, I'm actually going to hopefully start a book club, and that's going to be the first book that we're going to be going through. So keep an eye on that, because I really think this book can change a lot of people's lives.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you. And if there's anything that I can do, never hesitate to reach out.
Okay. Ditto. I'll return the favor. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much. On that note, Kay, thank you so much.
Thank you.